Now, I know he was talking about government budgets, and he was kind of mixing in personal budgets there. I want to, of course, make sure that you understand how zero-based budget works. And zero-based budgets are typically the type of budget you would build for a grant. Within a grant, you know how much money you have been awarded, right? And so the objective is to spend all that money to zero. And then you start to determine how much money are we going to put for salaries, how much money are we going to put for benefits, how much money are we going to put for supplies, how much money we're going to put for capital outlay. And when it's all said and done, we have zero left. So you start with the amount of money that you have and work it down to zero. And that's zero-based budgeting.
Is that plausible for a school district? I mean, would you be able to do zero, or is it just kind of...
Great question, Mike. And something it was going to be it's worthwhile for me to say is that schools use a variety of these different types of budgeting processes. For example, zero-based budget is typically the type of budget that's used for grants. And that budget page, we know how much money we're going to receive, we set aside the dollars for that, and we work our way down to zero. Go ahead.
Wouldn't ideally though the schools try to have a little bit of carryover?
That's why it's probably best to be used in grants. And you are correct. Yes, you're going to definitely want to try to have a carryover, so therefore you're going to want to build your budget in that fashion. The typical school budget is by and large incremental budgeting, by and large. Okay? Let's go to another type of budgeting, and this is called planning, programming, budgeting, and evaluating. And it is an outdated system that was used by governments, particularly the federal government, 10, 15 years ago. And in this type of system, you start out and you take a look at your needs and you do planning. You look at your goals, you look at your objectives, and you program those kinds of programs. From there, you budget those programs after having planned, and then you, and they have execution here, you execute, but you also evaluate. You also evaluate. And so, when the government was trying to really balance their budget, they were using this process. And if a program was not working after their evaluation, they didn't budget anymore in that particular program. And so planning, programming, budgeting, and evaluating, that budget system is somewhat outdated, but in that system you take a look at what you want to accomplish, what program are you going to match to accomplish that, and then after you implement it, you're going to evaluate it. And after you evaluated it, if you find that, well, we don't need quite that much money in that program, we reduce it for the next year. If it's not doing well at all, we scrap it completely. So another style of budgeting, one that is somewhat outdated at this point. Site-based budgeting has really caught the rage of a number of researchers. And basically what site-based budget is, site-based budget takes a look at a school building, and budgets are created for a school building. While it sounds great in theory, and the advantage of a site-based budget is that the individuals in the school know what their needs are, right? So they ought to be able to budget what it is they want and spend the money the way that they want to spend it. The disadvantage of it is that if you are taking a look at insurance and budgeting for health insurance for employees, to just do that by school is pretty hard to do. Same thing with salaries. It's very, very hard to do. So it does not work totally in theory. When it was first being written about, the researchers said, oh, this is the rage, this is the way to do it. You know, get the money where the people are making the decisions, let them make the decisions, and fine and dandy. But you know, when you get to issues like insurance or salaries, it doesn't. It looks nice on paper, but it doesn't work
I mean,
in
instead
reality.
of doing it district-wide, they do it like they would go to each building.
Yep.
Well, that would be hard.
Yes, very, very hard, and is not used very. It has a purpose, and it is used in some portion, which I'll talk about in a minute. Question.
Would you say that, I know that ours is not site-based in terms of us doing salaries and everything, but is there a version of like site budgeting?
Yes.
There where we have
You-
certain
maybe
powers?
you can coin that one because I haven't heard it phrased that way, but you're right on point. For example, the way many schools do it is, for example, they're going to say, okay, this school has 1,000 students, and we're going to put $2 for supplies in that school. So we're going to grant them $2,000, and they can spend it however they want to. Along those same lines, we have another school who has 500 students, so they're only going to get half that amount. So it's based on kind of the student count. In the meantime, the way we did that was high school got a little extra money because of the nature of high school versus the nature of elementary. Go ahead, Mike.
Is that not kind of unfair? I mean, you're kind of like, this theory is, you're kind of hurting the better schools, saying, well, you're already here. We got to get everybody here, so instead of them getting their full budget, you know, these schools are going to get a little bit more allowed to them. You know, I understand that every school wants to keep improving, but if I'm a principal at the school that's already here, I want to keep improving, keep getting better. But you're saying I'm bought, you know, I'm maxed out.
Well,
I can't.
you know, the one thing I want to say to you is, interestingly enough, there isn't a lot of budgeting that's done by performance. Not a lot of budgeting
That
done
would
by
be per
performance.
student, right?
Typically,
saying?
more likely by just the number, head count, FTE by student. And typically, and then there are certain line items, you know, for example, like supplies, certain line items. And as a district, a certain amount of money is set aside for that building, but then that building gets to choose what supplies they want to purchase. And if they want to buy it all, they want to spend it all on paper and not buy anything else, well, that's their business in site-based budgeting. And schools do some of this. So schools do incremental budgeting, they do site-based budgeting, and they do zero-based budgeting. So back to my point that a lot of different ways are used to budget. And there are a variety of line items that clearly it's best determined at the building on how they spend their money, not by the central office. Not by the central office. And you know, I use paper as the example. So site-based budgeting. Those are the basic budget models. Those are the basic budget models. And once again, schools, by and large, use a variety of these models to come up with their figures.
Dr. Bourne?
Yes.
When principals use the term, that can come out of the principal's fund, what does that mean?
Okay. I'm going to get into that in much more detail a little bit later here, but basically, the principal's fund is an account that is managed by the principal. And it can be done in a variety of different ways. And back to our site-based budgeting process, we decided, for example, that the high school building with 500 students was going to get $7,000 in the principal's fund, whereas an elementary school with 250 students might get $1,000. Now, how they spent those monies was their decision. Now, in the meantime, within the principal's fund, you might have pop machines, You might have other vending machine monies that go into the principal's account. And state law only allows certain kinds of expenditures in the principal's fund. You may only spend money for the students. I've often heard of award banquets for teachers, money coming out of the principal's fund. That might get caught on an audit.
Now, does the principal have, I mean, can they sign checks out of that fund, or is that still the school treasurer?
That's still going to be the school treasurer, and that's still going to go through the purchasing process that we'll get into here a little bit later in the presentation. Okay, so you already pointed out that when it's all said and done, we really like to have unencumbered expended carryover at the end to take us into the next school year. That really is our overall objective. And that brings me to two words I want you to hear. Okay? The first one is encumbrance, encumbrance. And the second term is unencumbered, unencumbered. Does anyone know what an encumbered expense is, or would like to take a stab at encumbered expense? Yeah, go ahead.
Encumbered is money that is committed money that has to be via a purchase order.
Right on point. It is encumbered. A purchase order has been signed, has been approved, and those monies are committed for this purchase. We haven't had those materials delivered yet, so we haven't paid for those amounts yet. So it's encumbered. There.
I was just gonna say I used one the other day.
Yep, yep. And so that right there is, those monies, if approved,
It's for
have
a
been encumbered. Okay? The next term is unencumbered. And unencumbered is unspent money. So when you're looking at the accounts that you are to manage, you will be looking for a column that says encumbered, and you'll be looking for a column that is unencumbered. And unencumbered tells you how much is available to spend. And typically, you'll see a percentage of how much of the total amount is still available to be spent. So